Why did AI cross the road?
Why?
To take the chicken's job. Nobody's safe. No, that didn't land. All right, hold on. I got another one. I got another joke here.
Oh, God.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the man who barely lost out on the role to play the dude in The Big Lebowski, Rich Swire. How's it going, man?
Good, man. I actually read for that part.
I'm not surprised.
In my own dreams, right?
They had to settle on Jeff Bridges because you were too busy at the time, right?
Yeah, unbelievable. What a movie. I wish I watch it. I watch it every Sunday. It's my go-to for relaxation.
Yeah, it's how you reset for the week. You're just like, here we go. Just get in that zone and then push through.
Yep.
Well, we're not going to talk about movies today. That's our other podcast that we'll have to link in this episode. But today, we'll be diving into the term CAIO and why you'll start hearing more about the importance of having a chief AI officer in your business in the coming months if you haven't already. So I figured we could kind of dive right in, Rich, talking about this term that, you and I kind of flirted with, I think, a handful of episodes ago. And we've always used as an underlying, I think, experience of what people should be looking for, maybe not just in hiring help, but where using vendors and keeping in mind where they could possibly fit into their business. But let's start first by kind of defining the role of a CAIO versus it just being some buzzword that people are starting to slap on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, so the idea, the play on words there is, chief artificial intelligence officer, which kind of lives in this in between what I guess a CIO would do, CEO technically, as well as maybe even some other CXO type roles, because it is a unique challenge for businesses moving forward on what exactly AI is going to have an impact on regarding their business, because it's not only an interesting technology and a technological problem, but it's also, a challenge when it comes to understanding your business process. And the new kind of thing that people are talking about is an AI first mentality, right? And reimagining and rethinking and maybe re-underwriting how your business operates with that in mind. So a CAIO is kind of that person who takes that, first kind of perspective that I think almost every business owner, for sure, and maybe most management is trying to figure out. Yeah. And I think it starts with this idea of, okay, AI is more than just a software that I'm going to install. It's more than just a platform or a new app that I'm going to give everybody access to. It's actually really a wholesale reimagining of your business. And so to prepare for that is actually probably what most business owners and executives are really struggling with right now. And so I thought this episode we can kind of dive into kind of our best practices, what we typically go in when we're talking about working with a business and going in and helping them build out their agentic workforce and prepare for it. Basically, we're taking on that kind of pseudo role and helping them kind of guide those waters, if you will, just because we've been through it, but also a lot of companies are struggling with, okay, how do I set up everything in play before I start deploying AI on a scaled basis? Does that make sense?
I think the CAIO, obviously that the terminology is there because it makes people question and say like, oh, what is that? And there's some limitations to the buzzworthiness, I think, sometimes of us wanting to just create spin around something like that. But really that position, is becoming more apparent with a lot of the companies that we've talked to, and just in, I think, the way that you need to delegate technology. Because like you mentioned, like a CTO, a CIO, somebody in this space that's going to be heavy on the tech side, you have to make sure that someone's going to be able to play nice, because the CAIO idea is kind of the new kid at school. So you're walking in that lunchroom, you're really not sure where you're going to fit in, and you're just trying to make friends without burning bridges. But you do kind of have to work almost in like a business goal or a business strategy mode. Like you have to oversee implementation. You have to make sure that it's not going to have any kind of ethical impacts on like both how the workforce utilizes it, but also where it fits into the actual scope of the company. So I do think you're right on the money that it's going to end up being something that has to kind of blur lines a little bit between different areas of business and leadership, but also be pretty heavy on, I think, innovation and implementation as like that role grows.
Yeah. Yeah, and the CAIO also has kind of different requirements. The typical CIO or CTO role is typically has a technical background, obviously some management experience, but primarily very fluid on implementing large-scale systems in some cases, applications, frameworks, things like that. And then, you have the CFO, CEO, and the CMO who are really more on the non-technical side, really kind of looking at business processes and so forth. But the AI requires both to kind of come to the table. So, I think the CAIO is kind of that coordinator, but has to be fluent in both sides of the aisle in the sense that they have to understand what the infrastructure is, what the technology that they currently are using, the ecosystem that they currently run on, because you don't want to disrupt that, right? This is not a wholesale replacement. This is more of an add-on. Even though it might touch all of your systems and might integrate a lot of your current applications, it's not meant to just kind of throw away the old and bring in the new. So that's going to require a lot of the help and assistance of the CIO, CTO. And then on the business side, quite honestly, it's probably a little bit more of a challenge because you're really kind of reimagining your business process. Every single arc that your customer, your partners, your employees, your prospects go through and how they interact with your business, you kind of have to go back and go, all right, where is AI going to impact us the best in those processes? And what we found in some cases, AI fits perfectly in an existing process and you're just kind of pulling one thing out and putting AI in its replacement. But in other cases, it might be a complete reimagining of the process and basically stripping it apart and saying, well, now that we have AI, now that we can scale, and now that we can do things that we couldn't do before, we've made the impossible possible because we have this conversational component now with technology. If I knew this existed 5 years ago, we would have never done it this way. But now that it does exist, we can completely, change that process wholesale.
Yeah.
So
let's take that and I think split it, because I think there's two topics in there I want to make sure we cover today on kind of a little bit more of a light bite episode when it comes to this. But let's talk first about the driving innovation piece, because I do think that whether a CAIO is an internal hire that you have or it's a vendor partnership, like something that we would do with Raia and a lot of our discovery, it's going to help companies, I think, stay competitive a little bit in that landscape, but really identify emerging AI trends and not just this, it's a flashy new toy, come plug it in. So let's talk a little bit about integrating that mindset into those business processes, and then we can dive into maybe the mitigating risks, maximizing ROI piece that would be the CEO, CMO, like all of that whole stack. Would that be good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. The first thing that you want to do as a CIO, I think, is you're going to want to understand what your current ecosystem provides when it comes to AI and what their roadmap is. Because obviously you're going to want to, survey and understand, okay, if I'm already using, XYZ CRM, if I'm already using XYZ CSR or support, software, or if I'm a Microsoft shop or a Google shop, whatever your, stack is, if you will, you're going to want to understand their trajectory when it comes to AI and cost benefit of whether that satisfies 30%, 40%, 60% of your needs, or if it, or if you need to go outside of that. What we found pretty steadily is that there is no such thing as a one AI solution that solves everything. They all have their specific niche and they all have their specific value proposition. And then it's whether you want to embrace who you want to embrace and how do you want to implement,
Yeah.
So for example, most of the CAIOs out there are the first step is, okay, let's just take Microsoft as a great example, because we had an episode on their Ignite conference. So when you talk about Microsoft Copilot, a lot of people go, "Oh, okay, well then that's AI. Then I'm good. I just need to upgrade everybody."
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, because first, it's really just enhancing their existing products. So yes, it does obviously provide you some ROI, accelerating your users, and maybe they can buy a couple hours here and there by using Copilot to accelerate a spreadsheet or help them review an email or a document. But that's just really, that goes in the tools bucket. And we've had past episode about the 3 basic buckets of AI, right? You have tools and you have add-ons, and then you really have this agentic side, which is really separate from all of them. So when you really get into the tool side, certainly there's probably a little bit of an uptick capability. Now you have to obviously balance that with, are you willing to pay $30 a seat in addition to what you're paying? It can be very, very expensive. So you want to make sure, A, that your users, your employees are going to actually use it. Otherwise, you're just going to have this massive expense and no ROI. So before any expense happens, I think the first order of business for a CIO is, okay, what does it look like from a cost value proposition, right? Always start with ROI, because what happens with AI is you get all of this information thrown at you and you might make a knee-jerk reaction. All right, let's just upgrade everybody, right? And next thing you know, we've got, if you've got 100 employees or 200 employees, now you have a pretty sizable bill, and you're not even sure if anybody sees the value. A great example is even our own, myself. I mean, I'm the biggest user of technology that I can imagine, right? Always wanting to use the latest, but we're a Google shop, right? So we're on Google Workspace, and it has Gemini, all these add-ons, but I'm still a ChatGPT. I still toggle over ChatGPT to do all of my, as a tool to do all of my AI, personal stuff like, hey, improve this, improve that, or it's like my new Google. Even though it stares me in the face every day because I'm in Gmail or I'm in Google Docs or whatever, like, hey, upgrade this to Gemini, use Gemini. I still haven't.
Let Gemini read this, please.
Yeah. But I don't even know what it's. I honestly can't think. It's really I think about AI all day. I honestly don't know, like, what am I going to use it for? And every once in a while I'll try it. I'll be like, I'm in a Google Doc and I'll say, improve the way this looks, or improve this writing. But it's not there. It's not, for whatever reason, this add-on kind of experience doesn't connect. And I've heard that from a lot of people. I mean, we've actually talked to clients that have talked about deploying Copilot, but nobody uses it. Nobody knows how to use it, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a problem. So you want to make sure that if you're going to deploy something, like, survey your employees, survey.
And there's got to be a knowledge path in place that's going to get them using it. I think is a huge piece.
Exactly. It's like one of the reasons why we lean into OpenAI so much and why they're such a key partner of ours is because, it's hundreds of millions of people use ChatGPT. It's become the fastest growing app in the history of the internet. And it's clearly, whether good or bad, it's defining the user experience, at least from a point of view perspective of AI. So, embracing that experience where people are very familiar with it, it seems to work, people like it. And obviously, then you kind of have to lean into what's working and not try to, like, okay, just because I have this existing infrastructure, I'm going to force it down their throats. We've seen time and time again in the past that doesn't work. So that's point number one. And then, when we talk about agentic workforce, it's a completely different problem. So, like, first I would say audit, make sure your users are wanting to use the tools. But when we're really talking about preparing for building out agents that would actually, whether they're autonomous or whether they're going to be enhancing your existing employees and your processes, that's a much more complicated decision, because what you're really deciding on is how I want to be able to have these agents operate in my, unfortunately, very complex and customized world. Yeah. Right? It's not.
We've catered it to us for the last however long, every company, and now you're going to put something in there.
Every company has, we've talked about this in past episodes, right? Every company has at least 15 different products. At least. Even we do, like, SaaS products everywhere, right? All, what runs our books, what runs our meetings, what runs our email, what runs our docs, what runs our CRM. So by default, right off the bat, you can almost disqualify any specific vendor from being your provider solely of your agentic workforce, because you need it to integrate with all these other things. So then the next question as a CIO is, okay, how do I need to approach this? Do I need to approach this more as I need to create a much more a platform or a framework that allows for me to build out these agents and have them connect to my existing infrastructure, have something that's available to me to still develop on if I want to put resources behind development, but something that accelerates the development of AI agents on one of the big platforms, whether it be OpenAI or Google or Microsoft. And of course, that's where we live, right? We live in that space where it's like, hey, listen, if you need to build out AI agents and you need to manage them and you need to train them, you should really be looking for frameworks that help you do that, like ours or others. And that would allow you to embrace the agentic workforce and connect it to all these different disparate systems that you have. So it's
100%.
And you can already see it. I mean, it's getting more complicated as I talk about it, right? Like you have to figure out what tools and add-ons you're going to want to embrace. And also I highly suggest that everybody pays attention to the cost, because I'm a big believer that AI eventually will not be seat-based. But what you're seeing is every SaaS product out there is trying to force it to be a seat-based system. And that's going to really drive costs for most companies that, quite honestly, are going to have a hard time finding ROI on that, because it's not like you can just say, oh, Lee's going to use it and Rich is going to use it, but I don't have to upgrade everybody else. What happens with these SaaS products is that they just force everybody to go up, whether they use it or not.
Or that user is going to end up going externally from the system, and then you're right back at square one again where it comes to security risk.
And they might like, I'm not really a big fan of Microsoft's Copilot, so I'm just going to toggle back over here to GPT and expense the $20. So now you're paying $30 for Copilot and $20 for ChatGPT on your expense report, right?
Yeah.
And so
then that just explodes. So you're on the money there.
So I think the first thing is ROI, value, cost, making sure everything's deployed. Second is infrastructure decision, making sure that whatever you're going to deploy and build out, your strategy is going to be able to connect your disparate systems. So you can't just go one vendor, one solution. And then the third piece, which I think is probably the biggest piece right now, I would say are arguably 80% of our companies that we've talked to, which I think, and also just in general, what you see out publicly and what people are talking about is the apprehension of security and policy. So that's like the final piece. So now I think it does come after those first two, because you're going to get a lot of answers and a lot of questions being asked when you start to build out your scope, your blueprint of what your AI strategy is going to be and what applications are actually going to touch the AI. And how it's going to be deployed. And then you can actually have a reasonable conversation around security and policy. And so
I was going to say, you do need somebody to kind of oversee those AI commandments that your business is putting in place, because again, from the traditional roles that we've all experienced in any kind of corporate structure with owners, founders, boards, C-suite, into the manager levels, everyone kind of has a different idea of what something should look like, and then it kind of just keeps going to the top until someone finally says this is the way it is. But with AI, you're creating really a new department and a new section of your business that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. So a lot of businesses have been very successful over the last handful of decades, didn't have to go through maybe the learning curves of pre-internet to post-internet. So now we're in this space again where you're kind of opening up the door to all of this new tech. But if you don't have something that can create a guideline that you can all follow, you're going to end up having everyone go off the path. Yeah.
And it's jarring too, because I'm sure most CSOs or CIOs and CTOs who are dealing with this are looking at this going, oh my God, I just finished SOC compliance. I just got through, I've got HIPAA and I've got all these regulations and I've already kind of secured, I've already locked everything down. Like I feel confident that,
where'd this door come from that just opened?
And then now it's like AI is coming in and going, hey guys, you throw all that out the window, and now you're gonna have to, so now the initial obviously approach is shut it all down, but that's impossible because your employees are still
already there,
logging on to ChatGPT and using it, right? Or they're still doing things that that you're unaware of. But the good news, I think, is, in my opinion, is a lot of the fear around AI security is unfounded. In my opinion, I think it's based on just a couple of experiences and articles and people that just don't understand how these things work. And I can break that down kind of in a nutshell. But so I think the breath of relief is, yes, of course, AI is a new technology that's coming into play. But unlike other applications that you might be deploying throughout your organization, I think this one is actually very easily implemented and managed and installed and done right
and cut off. I think,
yeah, I think the key is empowering having something that can empower your employees to use it, but all in a controlled environment where you can oversee it. But honestly, it actually might be one of the most, I think, secure-minded way of approaching an application deployment. And I say that because a lot of what the structure of AI is you have your foundational model, which is really what powers that ChatGPT experience everybody loves and gives you that kind of feeling of, oh, hey, I need this, and it gives it back, right? And I need you to summarize this document, it gives it back. So really what you're talking about is, when you're talking about these foundation models, they're really just read-only databases, as long as you're using the enterprise version of them.
Keeping it secure.
Yeah, which is what we obviously bring to the table, and we preach to our customers, is that don't let them use ChatGPT, because ChatGPT as a public application does train on the data that you upload. But once you cross over to the enterprise world and embrace the enterprise models, any of them, you're in a secure environment. Your data is not being shared. It's encrypted and everything is there. So the biggest decision, honestly, that a CSO or a CIO or CAIO that might be newly hired can do right now, honestly, the biggest thing they could do right now is embrace the idea of giving all of their employees access to a foundational model on day one, through like a ChatGPT type experience, but not allow them to go through the public version of ChatGPT. That's one of the things why we built out our Copilot, which is essentially a ChatGPT clone, but it accesses the LLM of OpenAI from an enterprise. So it's locked in, it's secured, it's encrypted, and none of that data is being used to train. Because that will stop the bleeding, if you will. Because the minute you give everybody access to the ChatGPT experience without having them to go out to the wild, wild west, that's keeps everything in a much more controlled environment, of course. And you can monitor that, and you have logs, and you have all those things that you want to have. So like the first thing to do, it's like, I don't know, I mean, I used to have a company that did wireless security, and I kind of make this analogy back in the day when Wi-Fi came out, and one of the biggest things with Wi-Fi, I don't know if you remember, this was like 20 years ago or whatever, when Wi-Fi came out and you could go buy these Linksys routers, right? And I don't know if you remember, but you basically would just plug it in, and it would be like, yep, Linksys, everybody's thing. They wouldn't even change the name. Nobody had security, even though there was WEP. The idea of memorizing a 16-digit code was like, nah, screw it. I'm just going to leave it open.
Yeah, so exactly.
So what was happening in companies around the world, and this is why I started the company, was everybody would just bring their Linksys into their
plug it right in, and then
plug it into the company internet, and then literally every packet that's traversing back and forth was available to any hacker in the parking lot. So and I had this great demo when I took a Pringles can and I would scan people's buildings and just to show you what a hacker would do. And literally you're just sitting there grabbing packets and reading emails, and it would freak people out. So obviously this is, now it's completely different, right? These things come secured. They've upgraded their security. So, obviously 10 years people learned, but in the beginning it was very much like that.
Yeah. Everyone knew Pringles was in the hacker game to begin with. Like, that's where they started.
And that's exactly what's happening now. When people go into ChatGPT and upload your company financials or your company privacy or any sort of PII or PHI, private information about individuals, then technically they're putting that into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is training on that. So you want to stop that right off the bat. Now, the answer isn't send out a blast email saying, do not use AI, because what does that mean? Because literally AI is in everything. Like it's like if you open up Google, it's there. If you open up Microsoft, it's there. If you open up Facebook or Instagram or so you can't say don't use AI, because basically that's the same thing as saying don't use the internet at this point, right? So a CSO and a CAIO has to kind of put a policy together, but with that policy, allow them to say, hey, by the way, this is why we're not using a public version of ChatGPT. Use OpenAI Enterprise. Here's an interface to that, and let's move forward in a more healthy environment. You still get the value, but you don't have the pain of it.
Yeah, it's a layer of that agentic workforce that will be there. And again, from a Copilot or GPT experience, it's not something that a company will go out and just say, this, I need just this one thing. It's just one more way that it lives within the ecosystem that they've built.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the way that we approach it, because we do believe that it is much more of an AI in itself is its own entity, and it's kind of it's not a tool or a software product in our mind. It's really a resource, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we don't do seat licensing. It's usage based, right? So basically, it's like, hey, you could deploy something like ChatGPT within your enterprise, not have to commit to some $30 a seat and have 90% of your people not even use it, and use it and deploy it as a usage based, and you get the best of both worlds. So this mindset, I think, in summary, is, first, kind of take inventory of all the different applications that you have in your ecosystem, all the different things that you want a technology to look at, and also how that aligns with roles and business processes as well. And then secondarily, once you've kind of taken that inventory of all those systems, kind of look at what those entities are doing as far as evolving into AI, not only to make sure that if you have to upgrade and see the cost value proposition, but also from a security perspective. And then third, when you're thinking about your agentic strategy, think about making sure that when you deploy agents, that it's on a framework that you can control and manage. Make sure you empower your employees to be able to have that ChatGPT experience within the company, because you want to have that boost of productivity, but you want to firewall that out so that you're not, sending that data out the door. But it's not as complicated as people think. I think it's a very simple solution. I think a lot of the SaaS providers are confusing people, quite honestly. I think what we're feeling is every time you hear about Microsoft or Google or these other guys, they're just like throwing a million different use cases at people. And it's like,
Just
hey,
muddying the waters.
everybody take a breath, right? Like they're still figuring out, most companies are still trying to figure out what the heck generative AI is. And you're throwing use cases at them that are like confusing the heck out of them. So I think if everybody just kind of took a breath and said, all right, listen, let's just figure out how to get the power of this stuff at the base level in the hands of my employees. Let's see what they're doing with it, and then let that drive our investment,
Innovation.
right? Exactly. Yeah. That's the better way of doing it. Because if all of your employees are using it for X, then you probably want to invest in building out a better X, right? Or a better Y. But if they're not using it at all, then you have to ask your question, okay, well, then we should probably train them on how to use it, or implement things that are going to help them use it to their advantage, and not go 100 miles per hour in every direction, confuse them even more. So it's really taking that assessment of where your company, where your people, your teams are in their mindset. And I think a lot of companies would be shocked to find out that a lot of people within their organization are using it much more than they would ever anticipated. And there are probably great case studies within their company saying, man, I'm using this and it saved me 5 hours a day, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a month. And then you add that up and you're like, oh man, if we got everybody doing what Jim does in accounting and what Sally does in support, man, we would be 10xing this company overnight.
One more reason to have a CAIO, whether it's internal or external, give you some guidance. So I think this was perfect. I think it lays the groundwork for a lot of people that probably are starting to hear this term thrown around, or looking internally for, do we have a resource right now that can step into this, or do we need to find someone that can at least give us a path forward? So for everyone that's listening, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue the discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show.